Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum Zoom series, Trolleyology. My name is Kristen Fredrickson. I am the Assistant Manager of Visitor Experience here at the museum. Thank you so much for joining us today for another program in our 2021 series, and welcome back to those of you who have joined us many a time before. This virtual series features programs on Pennsylvania transit history topics and stories about our collection that you can experience from the comfort of your home. And we plan to continue these programs regularly. So if you have a show that you think fits the museum mission, please let me know. And that would be anything about Pennsylvania, our collection, cities where our streetcars come from. You can see the full list of upcoming presentations on our website at patrolley.org, which I can share in the chat box in just a couple minutes. And thank you to those of you who have reached out. I see your emails and I really appreciate them. I'm keeping track of everyone who has programs, and we'll get started with a Trolleyology, the extra board in 2022, which will feature programs that aren't strictly related to our mission, but still feature trolleys in other cities and interesting programs that you guys want to see. So I also want to extend a special thank you to those of you who donated while registering for the program tonight. We truly appreciate your support of our virtual program. And for those of you who are new to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, we were established in 1954 as the Ardent Electric Railway by a group of trolley enthusiasts called the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club. And the museum opened to visitors a few years later in 1963 and is actually located along the line, the trolley line between Pittsburgh and Washington, PA. And you'll find almost 50 trolleys and electric railway cars here, about 20 of which run. About 30,000 visitors per year visit the museum and take the 4-mile scenic ride here. And we are now open with our fall schedule, Fridays through Sundays, through actually December 19th. And tickets will go on sale for our Santa Trolley event starting tomorrow. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But for now, I would like to introduce today's presenter, George Gula. George is an operator and a conductor at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. He volunteers in the archives, he gives outreach programs, and he's been here a long time, since about 1975. And he's been writing for our Trolley Fair newsletter since 1977. And George has been Zooming all over since the pandemic began for different museums and organizations. And he's even been doing some presentations in person again. So we are happy he agreed to come tonight, October 26th. I know it was originally for October 27th. So thanks for working with us, guys. And he'll be back again in about a month for a presentation on the Laurel line. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session with our presenter. But for now, the chat box is open. Please feel free to enter questions and comments during the show, and we'll be able to read through them at the end. And just a note, again, this program will be recorded and shared on our YouTube within the next couple weeks. So please keep your microphones muted and your videos turned off during the presentation so that there are no interruptions. And I'll invite everybody to turn them on at the end. All right, George, take it away.
Okay, let's make sure technology likes to work. And play. Wonderful. And I guess you can see that. And yeah, I have been doing some in-person stuff. I just got back from a Friday show for the Central Electric Railfans Association on Wilkesboro, Pennsylvania. So Kristen, there is another show that you might want to have, and I promise I'll shorten it. But today I'm doing Hershey Transit. The show that we had back in February or March, really got me interested in that little system. It's not something you see many pictures on, and I started to work on that. One thing I did go to Fred Schneider, a longtime member here, and he was very gracious in allowing me to use a number of his photos from the archive. The person who scanned them, pardon me, is our former archivist Ed Leibarger, who now lives out somewhere in the Wissinoming area. This is near Reading. I don't have a show for that yet, but he took a lot of time to work with Fred's stuff. And of course, there's a ton of other people, and there are publications that are out there that can be utilized. I did find a quick movie, but I couldn't get it in here, of a real bouncy ride up and down the hilly private right-of-way along the roadsides. But we'll start at the beginning, and we have to start with, of course, Milton Hershey. He was born in Deary Township, where Hershey is located, September 13th, 1857. And one of those people that did not like school. So, he quit after fourth grade. His father apprenticed him to a printer. I guess it was okay to do that. And he didn't like that either. Well, his mom then arranged to get him a job in Lancaster with a confectioner, a candy guy. And he really liked that. So at the age of 19, believe it or not, people were quite adult at the age of 19 back in those days. And he opened his own candy business in Philadelphia. The centennial was going on at time, and people were having a great time out there. If you forgot that Custer and 287 men had been killed the same year. But he was really hoping to profit, and he kept this business going for about 6 years. In 1882, he had to close it. And he moved to Denver. So he gets around, and in Denver, he learns to make caramels, the use of fresh milk. And now he starts his business in Chicago and then in New York. And in 1883, he's back in Lancaster, and he has opened the Lancaster Caramel Company. And believe it or not, that's pretty successful. Here's a little bit older Milton Hershey, and in 1893, goes to Chicago. And he sees a German chocolatier demonstrating a machine that makes chocolate, and he buys the machine. And now he's making the caramels, chocolate covered, in his Lancaster plant. Well, he sells it for $1 million around the turn of the century and purchases land back in his own home area of Deary, which is in Dauphin County. I know the French pronunciation is the Dauphin. It's the king, but here we say Dauphin. And then he begins starting the building of the chocolate plant. That's going to be the big, world's famous chocolate plant. He develops his own formula for chocolate. And if you've seen, he's traveling around because he gets that from Switzerland. And the sugar, the beans are delivered by the Reading, which is right by the plant. And he expects to get the milk from the surrounding dairies. And the Hershey bar is first produced. It's 1900. The Kisses make their appearance 1907. And the Hershey bar with almonds, all three are still here, were introduced in 1908. He gets married to a very lovely woman, Catherine Elizabeth and Sweeney. Kitty is how he's described. And of course, newspapers were like this. It was very important if you were a beautiful Irish Catholic woman. Up in the coal regions, the Irish were not as well regarded, but it was a good marriage. They had no children. And so in 1909, they established the Milton Hershey School, the industrial school for orphaned boys. And the boys all lived along or near the trolley lines so they could ride the streetcars to the school. I have read that he was scheduled to travel on the Titanic in 1912. He was in Europe, and because of business matters that required his own attention, they were not on the ship when it went down. The rumors that Kitty was sick are not true, but she did subsequently die quite soon after, in 1915. Here's the industrial school in 1915. Hershey, after Kitty's death, donated his entire fortune, including the control of the company, to the Milton Hershey School Trust Fund in 1918, and made sure that both male and female students would benefit. eBay's nice. You find beautiful cards like this. And the company thrives, and many of his workers are living there nearby. And he starts building a town, which is Hershey, which, believe it or not, is not an actual city. It is it's not a separate city. It is still within Deary Township. He's going to have a trolley system, a department store. He puts in telephone and electric service, parks, and recreational facilities. And he just feels, at least what I've read, is he feels a responsibility to both the place and the employees. So, they even have a post office and a railroad station with that name. But as I said, it's an unincorporated town. Here's one of the early cars on Chocolate Avenue. The car in the back is, I believe, at the first car barn, which he had to pull in and make a right-hand turn to get in. It's 1908. It's a beautiful postcard you can find on eBay periodically. But this is some of the early equipment. In fact, I think if you take a look at one of those cars over on the left front, that's probably one of the 3 cars that opened service, I believe in 1904. He chartered the street railway, the Hummelstown and Campbelltown Street Railway, in 1903. And this was typical. You charged it either for 1,000 years or usually 999 years. And this is Chocolate Avenue, chocolate factories at the end of the street. Another one of the early cars. And, this line was not built by anything but picks and shovels, horses and mules. And they took time to get the track laid down. They couldn't find enough people experienced in electricity at this point in time, turn of the century. So it took time to put up the overhead. But it was finally opened from Dairy Church west to Hummelstown in October 15th, 1904. And there's number 2, which is one of the 3 original cars, and it's out in Hummelstown. That's the public square. This is where they're going to connect with Harrisburg Railway cars. You can continue even farther west. In fact, all the way down to Carlisle if you get on the Valley Railways in Harrisburg. Now, the original line was thought then to go east. He wanted to go to Campbelltown. But well east of there was the Lebanon and Anvil, which had come out of Lebanon, went west and went to a town called Palmyra. It was there before 1904 when the Hershey system opened up. And he thought, well, let's link Palmyra, and then we can get people into Lebanon. I mean, we don't have to build as much track to do that. Now, the system, the Lebanon and Anvil, which will become yet another system, was owned by the Reading streetcar system. And you keep looking for things in the newspapers, and you hardly find anything about when the service comes to Palmyra. And one thought is May of 1905. The other is the fall of mid-October 1904. So somewhere in the middle of that, we can figure it's accurate. Here's number 2, one of the original cars, which came from J.G. Brill. This is in the end of the line in Palmyra. And this is what we call, 2 men in a streetcar photo. You can see them all dressed up, all the accoutrements that they need. I found this, and you guys know I did a show on World War II, and one of the issues in the 1940s and 44, was the institution of black motormen in Philadelphia, and they solved that by sending in 5,000 military troops. They didn't really have any fighting here, but it was newspaper article. And notice who's building the line: foreigners, which I'm assuming are white foreigners. And so, oh my gosh, now we're bringing colored people to replace the white foreigners. None of that is very complimentary to the people that are doing the work. But I put this in because, this is Hershey. It's 1906 in Philadelphia. Then was certainly not the only place to have issues. About the same time in 1904 and 5, the Laura line is also experiencing somewhat of the same issues. Colored construction workers building the tunnel that today, is operated. Railroad operates through that tunnel, and also the Electric City Trolley Museum. So this thing always ran rampant through the industry at all times. Here 6 and 11, they're passing in Campbelltown. They've finally got to Campbelltown. This is 1920. And it's also an unincorporated community. Now, Elizabethtown is south, and the Elizabethtown line will branch off from the line to Campbelltown. They chartered another system. That's a funny word, Deodate and Hershey Street Railway. But you want to get down to Elizabethtown. They're looking for access to Dairyland. And in Elizabethtown is the Conestoga streetcar system coming out of Lancaster. And they're hoping to make a connection with that. And they eventually will, and they'll run through Elizabethtown, and they'll continue on beyond to another milk station down there. The first Hershey car goes out of town Thursday morning, December 4th, 15. And, it's on the side of the road. And you can go now from Lancaster through Hershey to Harrisburg and across the Susquehanna River to Carlisle. All these systems are starting to link up. They finally, formed the Lebanon and Campbelltown Street Railway, and they want to go out in the eastern direction. That's Lebanon, PA, and it gets more press. Going to Lebanon gets a lot more press. It's about 10 miles long, less about 1,000 feet, and is what the paper says, the whole article. But the first regular car runs into Lebanon on Tuesday, February 4th, 1913. They had a test car probably for the contractor ahead of time. In Lebanon, you're going to be able to connect, at least at that point, with the Reading system and also with cars that will go to Lancaster. And here's a map I grabbed out of Chocolatetown Trolleys by our friend, former member. I think he's passed away now, but Richard Steinmetz wrote this very nice article. And you get an idea of what the system was. Going out to the left, there's Hummelstown, and there's where you connect the X's are cars to Harrisburg. Go out to the right and you'll see Palmyra, and there's the Lebanon and Anvil run by the Reading Transit and Light. You'll see the line going down to Elizabethtown, and then you're going to get down to Mount Joy. The Hershey cars will go as far as Mount Joy. There's a milk station there where they'll be picking up milk for the chocolate plant, and also the line to Campbelltown, and then eventually over here to Lebanon. And you look at the connections over in Lebanon, going to Ephrata and eventually to Lancaster, or going on the Reading system beyond to Myerstown and to Reading. Another book, this one is Benson Roebuck's book, but he had another very good map, and you get a pretty good idea of the system at its peak. It's about 1930 or so. The Reading, the hotel, notice the hotel coming off Chocolate Avenue to the right top. The Harrisburg lines are still there. They'll go in the 30s. And a little bit more detail on Chocolate Avenue. Now you have the second car barn there, which I think was a 4-track barn. And the early days, life goes on. It's a big celebration, the 10th anniversary of Reading. It's about 1913. It's Chocolate Avenue. And there's number 3. That's the car that will be converted into a line car. And it will be the last car to run on the Hershey system as it dismantles it. And then it'll have a mixed bag of history. And is safe right now inside his former home, the Hershey car barn. And it's been preserved by the Friends of the Hershey Trolley. Take a look at what some of the women's hats are pretty amazing. And, right down on the bottom, kind of in the center, take a look at all that stuff in the hat. Not just flowers. I don't know what it looks like. Looks like bananas. Fruit was popular in a hat at one time. Just amazing picture that Fred Schneider had, and I thank him for that. We'll look a little bit at Chocolate Avenue. So here's that map. There's the original car barn. In the early picture, we saw a car pulling out of that, and here's the somewhat larger West End barn. That would be the second car barn. The final barn is off to the right of the power plant, in the right hand, kind of top right hand. And then you'll also see the line heading east of Palmyra, southeast down to Lebanon and Elizabethtown. There was a junction there. And there's Hummelstown. It's heading east. Now, you don't see too many color shots. World War II would have precluded the use of color, and the line disappeared, in late 1946. But here's one to show you the very, very beautiful livery of the car. It's 1914 product. Almost all of their cars, certainly all the cars they bought directly from the manufacturer, came from J.G. Brill, company down in Philadelphia. And then there were a few Cincinnati cars that were bought from the Ephrata and Lebanon. One of those is preserved, and I think we saw Lisa's show. If you saw that wonderful show in February, they talk about how they're trying to restore it, and of course the history of that car. Ed Miller made 2 trips, one before and one after the war, to Hershey, and Ed had an eye for life along the line. He just didn't capture a 3/4 view of a streetcar. So you'll see the Hershey Hotel and some of the other buildings here. And this is 1938. This is one of his pre-war, before military service pictures. Here's a whole group of cars. There's maybe 6 or 7 here waiting at the Hershey School on Chocolate Avenue. It's at the department store. They're waiting to pick up the boys when they get out. And I think number 7 was one of the cars that survived the Ephrata and Lebanon abandonment and was purchased and later, restored, rebuilt by Hershey Transit. Another here are boys boarding. So there's another gang of cars. I think I count 5 here. Number 10 is in front. So that's a Brill car. And this is a 1944 shot from MD McCarter. Nice side view. That's Center Square. Almost all these towns, York and Harrisburg and Lancaster, Wilkesboro north of there. I mean, they all had little squares. I don't know if, like Wilkesboro, they were originally forts, but they all have public squares, and they're all very busy commercial centers. There's 3 cars passing here. That's the Community Inn, which I don't believe is there anymore. It's again a 1938 shot. This one from the collection of Fred Schneider. That little waiting area, everybody kind of waited for the cars here. It was just one of those places. It was very, very neatly kept. Car 19 was a 1914 project, and this is where everybody waited. It was a major stop in Hershey. The cars 19 and 11 are there too, although I think 11 is behind. No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it wrong. 11 is back, and 19 is here in the front. There's car 16, and that's a good, it gives you good location, good idea of what the park benches were like, the waiting area here in Hershey. There's the Hershey Trust Company. We're in the square, and this is 1945, about a year and 2 months before service will end. And there's another shot of that waiting area there, looking down the road. You get to see the right of way. Probably I don't have a date, but judging by the shadows, it might be August or so, late in the afternoon. Ed was always good at picking up all these cars. There's a passing sighting on West Chocolate Avenue or at Park Avenue. All the black cars, are illustrative of what you would have during and after World War II. We didn't really make any new automobiles from about February of 1942 until about 1948 or 9. First ones came, I believe, in 1949. They did start to make cars again after the war, but it was the 1942 version, and they were all black. And some of these cars are probably cars that have been relicensed by returning servicemen. With the really fancy stuff with the chrome and the wings, so that won't come up until about 1949. Now here's number 8, and that's one of the 3 Cincinnati car company products that came out of the Lebanon Ephrata. Originally, the company had a longer name, Lancaster, Ephrata and Lebanon Traction Company, but then of course it had to reorganize, and it became the Ephrata and Lebanon Traction. And Hershey got this car in 1934, and it took 2 or 3 years to decide what to do with them, but they did finally recondition them and put them in service. Park Boulevard at Park Lane, sort of at the edge of town, I think. Quite a beautiful place. The line goes off typically. Most traction companies do this. Certainly out in central Pennsylvania, they did that. They just roll along the side of the road, and it would be an up and down and undulating ride, and the cars would bounce back and forth. At least that's what the movies show. This is August 16th, 1945. And the war in the Pacific has ended. Maybe Ed is back on leave, or maybe he has been discharged. Ed Miller served. He was a wonderful photographer, good friend, and he served in the military with the railroads in England and then in Europe. So he might have already been home. But there's a chocolate plant, and we're looking east. That's Java Avenue over there. We're standing at Java Avenue. I think Java is where the Campbelltown line will cut off. So Ed is standing right near, but the line is Campbelltown lines behind it. But there it is. There's the junction, and that's a Campbelltown car coming in from Campbelltown. At this point, Lebanon has been cut back, and there's the line looking out to Palmyra. There's a car out there rolling along the undulating road, and eventually it will enter private right-of-way. This is December 1946. Ed caught this one too, 2 passenger cars. And there is one of the Milk Express cars that we'll talk about. That's 25. And they had until about, I think, 42, they had quite a very profitable milk and also an express and package business. And they had several of these cars. And this is pulling in, I think, to the barn. And a couple other cars on Chocolate Avenue here too. Atlantic White Flash gasoline. Is anybody old enough to remember that? I'm not. But we'll go out to Hummelstown first. Here's a map of the Hummelstown line, and I believe this is from the Hershey book. So thank you very much, Lisa. And but it was a great map, and it does show you how we're coming out of Hershey, and we're going along private right-of-way. Much of Hummelstown was private right-of-way. It's going through a town of Hawkersville, herb store, but I don't know if anybody, I can't get my mouse to work here. So, but if you look at it coming out of like 422, it will turn down it, down to herb store, and then kind of one side of the other of 322. And these are all monstrous 5 and 6 lane highways now. And eventually enter Main Street in Hummelstown, and at the square will connect with the Harrisburg cars. And this is a good idea of what the line's like, and it's also a very good idea of what the early roads were like. And you would imagine taking your wagon or even an early car on that with all the rain that we're having right now. When we say the trolley took people out of the mud, we really did. This is December 1941. I think it's Mill Street. I'm not sure. But this is kind of what it was, up and down, undulating, sometimes above the road. I'm going to warn you now, you'll see a lot of cornfields, but you won't see any cows, despite the fact that Hershey did an amazing dairy business. And you'll see it here running along the line like this, running at you. Today, I haven't been along Mill Street, so I don't know if it's 422 or 322, but I'm sure it's got, one of every McDonald's and Wendy's and Walmart that you can possibly see. But the agrarian nature of the line toward the end, I mean, you're almost at the end of service. And this is September 3rd, 45, a year to go. The agrarian nature of the area is very evident. Here's 322 at Bachmansville Road. This is Hawkersville, and the car is going to turn down, and it'll eventually get to herb store. But look at all the mailboxes. You had to go down to get your mail. And we'll turn. It's it was not untypical to have a store have a gasoline pump or two outside. And that was quite typical. Here in Pittsburgh, there are pictures of gasoline pumps, outside all sorts of places. That's Route 322. So drive it today and you'll see a great bit of difference. That's that straight private right of way. It's a well-maintained line. Brownstone Siding is here. And of course, Ed Miller had the eye, and you got a very good idea of what this line was like and the undulating nature of it. You can imagine the operator flying down with his controller pretty wide open and the car bouncing around. And as long as it did the right bounce and not go up and down, you were able to move. This is September 3rd, 1945. We'll cross The road at 322. This is one of those kinds of dangerous crossings later on when a lot of automobiles or more automobiles show up. You know, this can be a dicey place. Right now, certainly doesn't look like there's a whole lot of traffic out there. And there's the crossing again. It's between Hawkersville and Hummelstown. All major metropolises. There was a sighting out here, so you get a good idea of what the overhead line construction was like. And again, plenty of farms, plenty of agriculture out here. Again, September 3rd, Ed made a trip down there, obviously post-war, maybe for a fan trip, and he would usually go down a day or two early. Here's number 3, which was one of the original cars that opened service. It would later go from a combine to a passenger car and then would be rebuilt for the line car duties. It took over line car duties from a much smaller 4-wheel car, which I believe came from Baltimore. And we think this is east of Hummelstown, December 28, or it's between Hershey and Hummelstown. And now I think that house is still there. And it's en route to Hummelstown. This is Hawkersville. At least somebody told me the house was still there. It's March of 46. It's the last year of service. We're starting to enter the streets of Hummelstown or leave the streets of Hummelstown. It's a 1914 product. And another view of that side of the road, entering 322, the east end of Hummelstown. And here's one of Ed's famous pictures. This is the square. He had a way of capturing just everyday life, people biking, people walking, barbershop pole. How many of those do you see nowadays? The awnings on the building, because certainly no air conditioning. You had to keep the sun out somewhere. And that arch, at one point, the Harrisburg cars came in from the other direction. And you could transfer, get into Harrisburg, and then, as I said, go down to Carlisle on the Valley Railways or some other places in Harrisburg as well. The arch was, I think, a 1930 or 31 product, and he advertised Indian Echo Cave. I don't think the arch is there anymore. There's the Harrisburg car. And usually when I see a picture of a Harrisburg car, 70 is there. So 70 was regularly assigned to the Harrisburg line going to Hummelstown. This was the connection. And the Harrisburg cars would run all the way till 37 on this line, and they would end service entirely in 1939. Here's another shot, 70, about 5 years later. Anyway, and here's a really great shot. I don't know where I picked it up. It's somewhere down in the library, and I bumped into it, and it was like, wow, people getting off, you know, the operator and conductor doing their duty to keep the passengers safe. Now there's a bus, which is now being run by Harrisburg Railways as a replacement for the streetcar. We'll go east of Palmyra. We'll get this thing out of a newspaper. One of the early cars, again, no number, of course, but it was east of Hershey. And again, you know, they wanted to go to Campbelltown, and they eventually did. But it was much easier to connect with the Lebanon and Anvil cars. And then you get Hershey people to be able to shop in Palmyra, and also an earlier connection to Lebanon could be had. And so here we are on East Chocolate Avenue, and I think we're looking east. There is the Juvenile Country Club. You might ask, gee, what the hell is that? Well, I'll tell you. I knew you'd ask. And I'm going to read it too, but because I have a hard time remembering all this. But in 1932, Hershey added this country club, and it was the only golf course in the world dedicated to children under the age of 18. They paid a whopping fee of 35 cents and an annual fee of $10. And they had unlimited access to this court. And of course, it was very popular. They offered golf lessons in the fundamentals of the game, and also etiquette that was, you know, supposed to be had on the golf course. They had tournaments in the summer, and they made big news. I mean, on the Hershey highlights paper. The sport was popular with both sexes, and many of the boys spent their summers playing golf if what they could, and they caddied. They found jobs here caddying, and the facilities included a log cabin, pretty big, as it was a clubhouse, decorated with a hunter's theme and animal pelts and antlers and deer heads, and it had a main room that had big open fireplaces, 2 of them, I think. So, what happened now? 1969, the course became a public course to golfers. All ages are allowed, and it was renamed Spring Creek Golf Course. I believe it's still there. But, we're going to move along Route 422. And today it's another massive 4 or 5 lane road. Not back in 1945, in August of 45. Not long after the war with Japan ending World War II. Here's card 21. Clicking along. And just look at that. Look at that highway. That is a state maintained road. Between Hershey and Palmdale, or Hershey and Palmdale. This is still Dairy Township. Still September 3rd, 1945. Car 1, which I think showed up about 1905. There were 3 of these actually, and I believe they were combines originally, and then were rebuilt into these cars, and they might have lasted here. One of them, car 1, lasted until 47 or 8, no, 46. I'm sorry, because 46 with the Abandonment. This was a very popular fan trip car. The other 2 probably were gone by 1940. And this is an Ed Miller shot, and I can tell you why, because he loved movie. He always put a movie, if he could, in his picture, and there is a movie. August 3rd, 38. This is pre-war. And we're at the bank. The end of the line. He'll change ends. And again, another shot, this one in 41. Pearl Harbor has not happened yet. There's where the connections were made with the Lebanon and Anvil. At this point, they weren't there anymore. They had disappeared about 1930 or so. Main Street at Railroad Street. And the crowd is boarding. Let's go to Hershey. So we'll look at the Campbelltown line. This is another way of getting to Lebanon. And it would be the big way of getting to Lebanon at some point. And they put a whopping $225,000 down to build the line. I doubt that was enough. This was March of 1905. The line was completed in 08, about 9.25 miles from Campbellton to the end of the line at 12th Street in Lebanon. So we've gone to Campbelltown and then to Lebanon. And this car is almost ready to leave for Hummelstown. It was a through routed car, and it would leave Lebanon, Campbelltown, Hershey, and Hummelstown. He hasn't changed the sign yet, though. This is a trestle coming out of Lebanon, and you'll notice a little car barn and a milk station and a freight house down underneath that bridge, 1939. That was the NRHS. So there's the car on the barn siding, on the dairy station siding, and here comes a regular car down in. He's entering Lebanon at Oak Street in South 9th. And there we are at Lebanon National Bank. Beautiful shot of 7 as a Hershey car. But of course, this was its home city. Another movie theater. Yes, it's an Ed Miller shot. And there's Donald Duck cartoons there as well. You want to get off the car and have a fun. But the NRHS people are out there photographing it. And it's on South 9th Street at Cumberland Street. This was the end of the Hershey line. This is where you connected with cars of the Lebanon system. And but I don't think you have time to take in the Donald Duck cartoon. They had some very beautiful stations on this, and this was very well kept. Nice stone station, West Oak Street at Royal Road, also on the 39 fan trip. Here's a better shot of it, and it's a substation as well. So westbound car. We're west of Lebanon. So we're approaching soon Campbelltown. Now, I love this, typical shelter. Much better than the Laurel Line shelters. I'll tell you now, this was the end of the line in 46. After they removed the service from Lebanon, they stuck up a pole and they have this shelter. And you can see how far it is to Philly and Ephrata, Colebrook, and Palmyra. And here we are again. We're in Campbelltown siding. So that's actually an actual passing sighting on the 1941 fan trip operated by the National Railroad Historical Society. A gorgeous shelter and a gorgeous shot. Where we are, is on the private right of way. This is along Governor Road at Homestead Road. And this is pretty much where the Elizabethtown line branched off to the right. You can see the car turning, and to the right, the Elizabethtown is going to branch off. And we'll take a look at that in a bit. There's a house I wouldn't mind living in. Kind of noisy. August 16th, 1945. There's stop two again. I think we're Main Street at Colebrook Road in Campbelltown. That was the end of the line, which is behind me, I think. So I got that one out of whack, out of order. Another one of those dangerous highway crossings that had many times an accident would happen in something like this. And we're right at the county line between Dauphin and Lebanon County, 46. Yes, the snow is coming. Give it 2 months. It'll look like that around here as well. And we're at the second turnout or the second sighting, passing sighting on a line at Campbelltown. That's all it says. It's the second turnout. You only have to guess sometimes where that is. There's car 7 again, and the Brill on car 23. This is at Fontana. Swinging back into the right of way out of a sighting, and this car is on the way to Lebanon. And as I said, there was a lot of corn in these pictures. We're east of Campbelltown, so we're on the area between Lebanon and Campbelltown here. And this is actually at Campbelltown, the sighting in Campbelltown. So again, Atlantic Gasoline, and it fixes Oldsmobiles if you look at the sign. It's the west end of Campbelltown. The car this car could have come in from Hershey. It could continue to Lebanon, or it will eventually change ends a little bit down at the end of Campbelltown. This is 46. And we got the house numbers. If anybody cares, 5, 141, 139, and 137. They're all there on the left. Beautiful shot of 7 on the right of way. Elizabethtown. This was another way of getting more milk onto the system. And by getting down into Lancaster, Conestoga Railway territory and grabbing the milk that they could get down there, they weren't going to compete with Lancaster. Lancaster cars were going the other way. Pretty good ballast. That could have been new. This is probably a fan trip. By this point, 38, these cars were pretty much fan trip cars. But it was a 1903 car. And was a combine, as I said at one time. There's stop 50. And 51. No, we're not going to walk along the line getting to all the stops. They all pretty much look like that. A couple of fancy ones, as you've seen. And there's that really fancy one, in fact. And you'll see a Campbelltown car in the background. He's pulling out and starting to go toward the rear of the picture. Here's the special fan trip car on the Elizabethtown line, Governor Road and Homestead Road. They were not shy about building culverts when they needed to keep the line graded. See the signal on the pole. Now, they crossed the Pennsylvania Railroad. I think at one time they had considered working with the Pennsy if they could. Obviously, the Pennsy hated streetcar companies, but they thought about laying a third rail, using that track. Never worked. And so they built over it. This is the Beverly branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad that they crossed. Another color shot on the Elizabethtown line. Now, this is after they cut it back to downtown. We'll talk about that. They originally went through downtown Elizabethtown and down a ways to the milk station that they had there. And during the 30s, I believe this was not a paying line for Lancaster. And when street repair projects loomed ahead, Lancaster said, well, hell with that. And Hershey said, yeah, to hell with that. We'll stop at the north end of Elizabethtown. And then downtown Elizabethtown lost their service. Another one of those dangerous crossings.
The question was, is the livery dark green and cream?
Well, there's black roof, and that is a very dark green. You know, cream, I've heard Ed Miller call this yellow. I would call this cream. Probably those of us that have been in the hobby for a while and have seen color pictures know that Pittsburgh cream is different, say, from Philadelphia cream. So I would call that cream. It's kind of a whitish yellow. Lisa Malloy might have some other opinions about what that is. I know Ed Miller called that yellow. So actually, it's I guess we all have our opinions. I would call it cream. It's definitely a dark green. It was a black roof.
Lisa says cream.
Cream. See, okay. There's the substation they built. You know, you got a DC trolley, and DC, unlike AC, the farther you go out from the power plant, you know, the more the voltage drops, and periodically you'd build a substation, and the substation would up the voltage and try to keep it constant along the line. So that's what the substation here is doing then. And the end of the line, once you got out of, the trolleys could no longer run into downtown Elizabethtown. This was the North Borough line. And there was a siding there and a little freight house and a little place to wait. And this is the line that this is where the cars would terminate from 1932 till about June of 1940. And then this line would just be picked up and abandoned. By 1940, the thought was, like so many companies, I know Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, all thinking about, Reading was another one, getting rid of their streetcars, and the Office of Defense Transportation would have other ideas after the beginning of World War II, and these trolleys would continue to run throughout the war. And then a year or two or three afterwards, as buses were procured to continue the substitution. Here's another shot at the end of that line. Hershey Hotel line. They built this line up there. I don't know as much about it as I would like. You know, the Hershey put this hotel up, I believe, during the Depression. And they ran a trolley line up there. There it is, I think, back there behind us. They had a loop up there. The car kind of wandered up the hill. And I think also past the school. And of course, number one is the fan trip car again. And there's the hotel up there. This is an Ed Miller shot in 1945. And you had to go under the Reading Railroad to get back to Chocolate Avenue. And that's what this tunnel does. You get back all back to the gritty industrial scene down at Hershey. And this is Mill Road Park at the Reading Railroad. A beautiful shot of in fact, that's now, I believe, I don't know if that's the Bernie car. No, it's number 7. These cars eventually would run between the hotel and Campbelltown and the through service in the other direction was Hummelstown through Hershey to Palmyra. They added a Bernie car on this line, and it wasn't able to keep the schedule heading out in the private right of way to Campbelltown. That would eventually be sold. There's number 20. Nice little car. I don't have a date, but if anybody knows their cars, maybe they can help me out, tell me what they think. Remember, the line was abandoned in December of 1946. Here's number 8, the end of the line. I think that's another one of the cars that came from the Ephrata Lebanon, of the 3 cars. But just a beautiful little line there. Passing siding in the middle, obviously not well used, or maybe not used at all at this point. But the siding was there in 1945. The beehive, which I suspect is a furnace of some type. Beehive ovens of the old days. They weren't doing coking out here, but they could have done that for iron making. And there it is again, the beehive. Now there's the Bernie that they bought. It was an ex-Grand Rapids, Michigan car. It actually had a name, Springfield, and it was an American car company, 1926 product. Hershey got it in 35 to run up here. But as I said, it just didn't work well with the other cars. It couldn't keep the schedule, being a little 4-wheel bouncy car. So they sold it to the Marion Railways of Indiana, and they was renumbered out there as 24. But there it is.
Quick update on the beehive. Lisa says it's a stage.
It's a what?
Stage.
A stage?
Stage, like ST.
Hey, like okay, for performing. Huh. Okay, thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate that. There's a beautiful shot of the hotel. Beautiful grounds. And there's the burning car. Now, of course, we all know that Milton Hershey needed milk for his chocolate plant, and it was very important that he got it. And really, what they believe the main intention of his trolley line was to go after the milk. Here's 25. It's the power plant road. I don't know whether this is the road going up to the barn, but not only did they carry milk to the plant, but they had a thriving express business, a package and express business, and they would collect it from trucks and along the side of the roads, and they would bring it into Hershey. And so many other systems, even Pittsburgh had freight. West Penn here in Western Pennsylvania had a freight service, but their business was still going pretty well. In 1942, this was typically what happened. If you're a farmer, you're going to bring your tagged cans of milk to a siding, and a freight car is going to come by, and it's going to dump off your empties. It's going to pick up the milk. It'll take it into the dairy, and the paperwork is all done. Some on the car, some in the plant. You'd be paid for the milk you bring. There's a little bit bigger shot of that area. It shows the typical station. Was a good shelter view here. Did keep the wind and the rain off you. There's 25, which is one of the express cars, and this is on the Lebanon line. There was milk picked up on the Lebanon line, not only in Lebanon, but they went out beyond to a town called Lincoln, and there was a milk terminal there. It was kind of north of the city, and they were picking milk at that terminal, and the Ephrata Lebanon was making a nice little bit of change on that, helping to keep the line afloat.
What year was this photo, George?
This photo was, I don't know, it really, that number on that photo, because I went back and looked, and it really wasn't there. So we're in the 40s, knowing that, this is Fontana sighting, it could be 41 or 2. It's probably not after the Second World War starts. They banned photography. Take pictures of trolleys, you could be a saboteur, a spy. My guess is 40 or 41. But yeah, cameras were quickly banned, and you can ask Art Ellis. Art Ellis, you know, had some permission to take pictures even before the war. He had to get permission from the Army, the Navy, the FBI, and he deliberately did not shoot a West Penn picture of the crossing of the Pennsylvania Railroad. He figured the whole roll would be censored. But there's your typical milk car. There's the hotel in the background, and it would be just full of milk and also packages. Notice how it says express. There was a big whoppingly profitable package service. In fact, for the milk business, they built this 3,000-gallon insulated milk tank car, which was pulled behind one of the freight cars. And so they could get it to a milk terminal. And I think they built this for the terminal in Lincoln, outside of Lebanon. Now, when they didn't need it anymore, it found another use. It became a weed sprayer. And this is from the Hershey Transit. And this is one of the pictures Lisa had, Neil, Fashionat, all these rail fans. You guys got to know, though, and some of you probably do if you collect photos. I could go to a train show sometimes at one point and get 5 of the same photo from 5 different dealers. And sometimes they weren't even labeled. You had no idea who took them. I've used this photo because it really, really shows a milk terminal. It's either in Lincoln, which is the Lebanon area terminal, or Mount Joy, which is where the Lancaster area terminal was. And the milk cars served both of these terminals, and this is what would happen. And they would fill it up. And this one's kind of interesting because you now have some trucks. Farmers are using trucks. They're not putting them there on the platforms. They're taking it right over to the milk cart. Of course, the next step will be to take the milk directly to the plant. Now, this is the creamery in Lebanon. It's not very far from the bridge. The bridge, I think, is behind me that we saw before. Notice that other milk truck there, you know, a milk tank truck. We probably are looking at late 20s or early 1930s, where truck technology is getting much better. And I borrowed this one as well because it's a wonderful picture and it clearly shows, you know, what it was like. There's the conductor. He's doing his paperwork standing up. Can you imagine a rattling in the car as the car clatters back and forth and the cans clatter back and forth? So, and there the cans just loaded to the gills. And it says freight and express because they did do that. They did. He's probably in the siding waiting for a regularly scheduled passenger car. Sorry about that. Now, there's the junction behind us with the Elizabeth line. There's that fancy shelter between the trees. There's a work car, Hershey work car, might be 25 or 7 out there. What was a double cab flat car, which could carry things like ballast or ties. And this is Homestead, is what they call it. I think it's at least the photo says. The photo says it's one of the last daily trips into Lebanon for milk, December 16th, 1941. They had daily service, sometimes 2 cars a day on each line, bringing in the milk. Chuck Sievert took this one, a couple cans on the platform. Private right away. And I found this on the internet. Beautiful shot. I love it. I thought that truck, that's amazing. This is a much earlier truck, kind of a weird cab, because the car is, of course, still painted up for the Hummelstown and Lebanon, or Campbelltown, Hummelstown and Campbelltown line. It'll eventually become Hershey Transit, but that's a weird truck. But notice if it's early on, trucks were already being utilized in some fashion. They're bringing the milk directly to the car. Looks like easy loading. I never really totally got this one done. I just came back from Wilkesboro a couple days where there was this massive treatise on Wilkesboro Railways. So, Kristen, we could unmassive it a little bit if you guys want to use that someday. It's up toward the area that I used to live in, but you know, they had 3 of these cars This is shot in 1909, but these are types of cars that opened up service in 1904. And I believe that's number 3, and that may have been the car that became the line car. There's the cars showing up. They showed up in 1905. It's the fan trip. It's the substation at West Oak Street near Lebanon. And these were originally combines. They were later rebuilt by Hershey. 2 of these were gone by 1940, and one stuck around for a while. And it was, as I said before, a very popular car. Here's number 4. That's one of the ex-Lancaster, Ephrata, and Lebanon cars. And these were not Brill. I believe they were Cincinnati Car Company products. But most of them, were Brill. And here we are in Chocolate Avenue. They had a couple of groups of cars. Here's number 7. Beautiful. Yes, that's green and cream, black roof. At the waiting station there, Cocoa Avenue. That was another one of the Lancaster, Ephrata, and Lebanon. I'm not sure what their original numbers were. This is the number assigned by Hershey. And that's a 1935 shot. 11 was a Brill product. I think it was 1914 or so. A lot of their stuff came from J.G. Brill. There's the old Hummelstown and Campbelltown car house. I believe the original one, which I think was 3 tracks. 17 again. It's about 1938, and this car was one of the 1913 products. Eighth Cumberland. This is actually in Lebanon, PA. They picked up people, they dropped off people. Wasn't just from Elk. Lebanon people would transfer to the Hershey cars, vice versa, going back down to Lancaster, the Lancaster area, or up to Lincoln. They had passenger service to Lincoln. Here's your Bernie, which we did talk about. It's a nice close-in shot of it, though. The poles had to be elevated a little bit to reach the overhead. And number 3 as a line car. This would have been this is 1940, so it's out there just doing its normal thing, out there patrolling the line, fixing the things that need to be fixed. But this would be the last car that operated on the system by tearing out the overhead. This little thing obviously was a passenger car, and I don't know much about it, but it had to have been 1904, 5, 6. It had a little home built gondola, if you want to call it, and you notice the ballast or the fill that was in it. Never had any real dump cars here in Hershey. They did have, however, sweepers. I think there were 2. And one of Fred Schneider's photos from his collection. It's not the clearest thing, but then back then you can't expect the photos that we took back then with the cameras that we had back then certainly are not anywhere near the quality of photos that we can take today, even with our phone. But we're certainly happy to have them. And it really shows a nasty day out there. If you take a look at the side of the sweeper, it's got its side plow out, so that as the sweeper pushes the snow at about a 45-degree angle to the side, that plow is going to push snow away. Probably it's got to sweep 3 feet on both sides of the track. And that was a way of getting it off the track entirely and back onto city property. Here's the weed sprayer, sans the insulated milk car. And that was built, I think in 1916 or so. That was their work car. I was wrong about 27. It's 28. It's a drop side, so you could put rail or ties on it, or if you lifted those wooden sides up and you secured them with stakes or pegs, then you could put some material that might need to be dumped, something loose. And that is, I think, the original. That's not the original. That's a newest cardboard. That's one of the express cars. That's 1939 on the ladder for the new cardboard. This little baby 29 came from and it has a plow on it. Notice the heavy snow out there, but it was built in 1914. It was the New Jersey and Pennsylvania Traction Company, which did cross the Delaware River. And this thing was bought about 1920 to be an addition to the milk fleet. And at that time, all these trolley lines connected. They were all broad gauge in central and southeast Pennsylvania. And this thing came down from Yardley and ran through Philly, and it ran over the Red Arrow and ran over the Westchester Street Railway, and then on the Lancaster system through Coatesville, finally to Elizabethtown to get onto Hershey rails. And that was amazing that you could do that. And not very long after that, the system started to see breaks. And, later on, they thought this would make a great plow. Now, I think because of the 3 tracks, this is the original barn. Hummelstown and Campbelltown barn. Sometimes I've seen the word in early newspapers as Campbellstown, but much of the time I'm seeing Campbelltown, and that's the one we'll use here. End of the line. Well, you finally, by now, can get newspapers. And the thing is, you're getting a lot of stuff coming in by motor truck, and Hershey itself is starting to bring in the milk by motor truck. So in 1929, early in 1929, it's going to cancel its milk contract with the Ephrata and Lebanon. And that puts them in a horrible financial spot. There was a lot of Hershey money helping to stimulate operations. They're going to abandon in Lebanon their services in 1931. And you notice over here on the right, the Reading is involved in all sorts of financial machinations. And, it had become part of a holding company, General Gas and Electric. And then another holding company grabbed it in 1928, the Associated Gas and Electric. And you can see by the title, they're interested in the power systems that these trolley companies have. And they would either get rid of the trolley lines, or they would at least cast them off, form a new company, so they weren't all tied together financially. And in 1930, that's what happened. And right away, they get involved with the city because that larger system hadn't paid any taxes. So we'll go after you. And that stopped the trolleys in July 21st, 1930. That's my birthday. This notice was put up by Hershey. Hershey decided we're going to remove our operations from Lebanon. We'll cut back to Campbellton. And that abandonment to Lebanon by Hershey occurred in December of 41. And they did have a lot of thoughts about getting rid of this system very quickly. We're going to get rid of it as soon as we can buy buses. But the problem is, very soon the war showed up. And soon after that, a government organization called the Office of Defense Transportation, which was responsible for all freight and passenger transportation, including urban transportation, took over. And they basically said, hey, the trolleys are here. You keep them running. We don't want buses paralleling your line. We're worried about how much rubber we're going to use. Rubber, of course, was something very hard to get, being that the Japanese own about 90% of it at this point. And there was also gasoline rationing, so they couldn't get new buses. And after the war, you just can't go out the day after the war and say, I want buses. They weren't there. It took about a year, maybe a year, 2 or 3 months to finally get enough equipment. And I think what they actually did was they actually contracted it. Here's the last day, December 21st, 1946. And that's when the last trolley, rolls east toward Palmyra, and another car goes west for Hummelstown, and then they come back. And there's the Hershey Coach Company, but that's a Reading Street Railway subsidiary. So the Hershey people never did get to run their own bus. They just contracted that out. And this showed up from the Lebanon Daily Times, and it's a Hershey car out in Palmyra. And it is purported to be the last car on December 21st, 1946. And somebody said there were records indicating this is actually a Hummelstown car. But since they ran through, we're really not going to know. But this is certainly the unhappy last day of something. There's the line car, number 3. and it's involved in taking the wire down. A lot of this wire, of course, was on private right-of-way, and you didn't have a line truck. And it would be very difficult to park that line truck on a street, a paralleling street anyway. So, it's easy. Let's take them down first in the city. At the end of the line, we'll start, backing out. Here they are in the private right-of-way. And this became a line car, I think, 26, 28, something like that. It's got that nice movable tower, wooden roof, of course, so that makes it much safer to do that. We don't know what happened to most of the cars. Obviously, this picture, which is not credited at all, but showed up in our archive, is that somebody bought it for some kind of a shed, and it probably was one of those things that just crumbled on its own, and they got rid of it. I think most of the cars are probably gone, by 48. The line was dismantled, I believe, by 48. If you remember, Lisa said it was in a scrapyard. Lisa Malloy from the Friends of Hershey Trolley said it was in a scrapyard about 48, and it's eventually going to go to a fledgling trolley museum, Trolley Valhalla, which really didn't make it off the ground. It was outside all the time. And then it went to Railways to yesterday, our friends down by East Broadtop, where I think it probably, because of a lack of space, probably stayed outside as well. All this wood deteriorating, and finally, it went back to Derry Township, and it is stored in its former home in the newest car barn. There's, you can still wander along the line. I guess you got to watch where you step, but if you look in the middle, there are abutments. Some of the right of way is still there. More culverts like this. There's a new modern rebuilt road, but you can still find stuff like this. And not just in the Hershey system, there are other places that you can find this. The substation, of course, buildings like this were well built, and they're finding other homes, other purposes. They've got add-ons here, but you can kind of see where it was. And by looking at this, you can tell where the line was here as well. And that's all I have. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And, we could have conversation or questions. Whatever you want to have, or somebody can boo me because I'm not good at all at this, but wait till I get to the lower line.
Well, thank you very much, George. We will get to questions in just a second, because there were some in the chat that I wanted to ask you. But really quick, before we get to that, and I'll let everybody unmute here, I did want to let everybody know we've got in 2 weeks a Trolleyology about the Pittsburgh and Allegheny Valley Railway from Dennis Kramer. And then in about a month, the week of Thanksgiving, we'll have the Laurel Line, Scranton to, oops, my Wilkes disappeared there. Sorry about that. I don't know where that went.
I can see you're from Atlanta.
Oops. And then Schuylkill Railway show in December. So we've got quite a few interesting things coming up, some Pennsylvania things. Yeah. So stay tuned.
Kristen?
Yeah.
I'll let the audience know, because Schuylkill Railways was one of the anthracite trolley lines that I know the least about. I have looked for things in the newspapers and everywhere. And Mike, I think it's pronounced Salagi. Mike is working on a Rails to Trails project up in that area. He where the connection between Schuylkill Railways and Eastern Pennsylvania Railways in Pottsville was, which, believe it or not, is a place you can eat pizza now, went up a very steep mountain into Frackville and down the other side and up another mountain into Shenandoah. And he's been working on that as a trail. So he's had access to a lot of things I've never gotten into, state reports, mining maps, PennDOT maps, and he has found a lot about this system. And, I guess I would recommend, I've talked to him a number of times, both conversations at dinner at East Penn were with him on this, and he knows a heck of a lot about this very unknown railway. So I would definitely say if you guys can find a time, this is something you want to see, because you're going to learn a lot of stuff from this gentleman. He's very interesting. He's a very good speaker, and we all know Andy McGinnis, I think so.
Well, thanks for that advertisement, George. There is a description up on our website. The only registration that you can do right now is the one in 2 weeks. So that is up on our website, patrolley.org. And this Friday, we have a very exciting event called Distilling the Trolley Era, featuring some theater and some whiskey. So check that out on our website if you're local. And Santa Trolley tickets go on sale tomorrow. We're very excited to have this again in 2021 after having to cancel all of our events last year. So Santa will be returning to the Trolley Museum this year. Very exciting. Again, thank you so much to those of you who donated during the registration process today. It really, really helps. And if you'd like to support us, you can go to patrolley.org/support. I'll put that in the chat in just a second. But for now, feel free to turn on your videos, and you should also be able to unmute yourselves if you have a question. George, we did have a couple interesting ones in the chat. One person asked, Gary asked, if there were transfers between all the different systems. So were there transfers issued, or did you have to pay every time you switch systems?
Well, to be honest, I don't know. I've never, put it this way, I've never seen any Hershey transfers even for the system, the local system. So I'm not sure if you have to pay another fare or not. I plead, the fact that I don't know. I'm dumb, but you could physically make the transfers. I suspect because these were separate companies, this is my suspicion now. They're all separate companies, and probably none of them are really making money. I suspect you pay another fare to go from Hershey and Hummelstown to Harrisburg. Most systems, you don't have that connection. And even in Pittsburgh, you have to, I think, pay a second fare to go out, say, to Greensburg on the Westmoreland County Transit.
I remember you wrote a website article for us on this topic back in February. And you had mentioned that it wasn't uncommon to see cars from other lines running through Hershey on charters or taking people to a park or the hotel.
Well, that's true. Hershey Park was a very exciting place to go. Now, not the only system that did this. So Harrisburg cars and Lancaster cars would run over the Hershey line to get to the park. In Allentown, you had Dorney Park. And I believe there were Allentown and Reading cars coming out of Kutztown that also, went over and, over other people's lines. This was not that uncommon where you had a destination that was important, and Hershey Park would have been one of them.
Sure. We had a question. Jim asked where else you've presented, not directly related to this presentation, but I know you have presented on Zoom for a couple local historical societies and Rotary clubs. Is that right?
On Zoom, yeah. I've been a longtime member of the Lackawanna Historical Society up in Scranton. A lot of time spent there growing up. And I've done the Northern Electric for them. I've done Scranton Transit. I've done a Loreline show for them. I just came back from the CERA and I've done a number of shows over the years for them. And it involves a drive to Chicago. The benefit is you get to eat Chicago hot dogs if you like that kind of stuff. And I've also, I've been a founding member of the NRHS chapter in Scranton, and I've done about 8 or 9 shows for them. They have something called a sentimental journey every year. It's a slide program, and I've usually done a traction component. Also, I've probably done about 9 or 10 of them at Hoosier Traction meet in first Indianapolis, and this year in Toledo. And I've done Philadelphia stuff for them, and of course a lot of Zoom stuff. So I've kind of been all around. And we had a lot of we used to have a lot of senior citizen groups here and local groups that I think are not meeting right now because of the pandemic. But we're starting to get back to some real in-person stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say you're a major reason we've been able to keep our Trolleyology series going. I think we've done 4 or 5 presentations for us at least. So thank you.
Probably have, and it's been a lot of fun. I know we did
And,
the urban program and the Loreline. We're going to do Loreline, and we've done a number of things. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and
you can see George's earlier presentations on YouTube. So check those out. Getting lots of nice comments in the chat here. And thank you, especially to Lisa, who presented back in February on Hershey Transit. So she was providing some facts and a couple corrections that I mentioned. You'll see those in the chat. But yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody who came. Anyone have any comments or questions for George?
What I want to know, Kristen, is there a way to keep the chat up so that I could
oh yeah, I can mail it. I can send it to you.
Would you send that? Because I'm very, very happy Lisa's been able to give me those corrections. You know, she lives out there and she certainly knows more about the area than I do. But I want to make the corrections and put them in the show.
Sure. And a question from Jim. Where did you find the maps that you've the system maps? Are they station maps?
Now there's several books, and one of them is I think is in here. This is a book put out by the Friends of the Hershey Trolley, and it's an Arcadia book, and it's a well-written book and a lot of nice photographs, and they do have good mapping. Ben Rohrbeck also had some mapping in his book. There's another one, I can't remember what it was, but it was a yellow and green cover. I have to remember the title of it, but there's a map in there, and it really talked about Lancaster and Hershey and the lines in that area. So you got to grab a lot of stuff and try to put it together. I think that maps are very important for all of us that really don't know the area.
He said you mentioned there were some maps that you couldn't use. Did you mention that? He wanted to know where those in particular were from.
I don't know. I used everything I could find.
Okay.
I used what I could find. Now, wouldn't it be nice to have an old PennDOT map or that showed the trolley line? And you know, they have these maps of they're going to rebuild a line, and a lot of times these maps showed the trolley line. They did that for Eastern Pennsylvania Railways, but then they threw it away. But you know, you find what you can. You keep looking for, you know, something else.
Yeah.
But think about it. This line was abandoned in the end of 1946. So that's what, 50, 60, that's like 75 or 78 years. And most of the people, or maybe all of the people that rode this thing that can go out, point and say, yeah, it's over there, aren't here with us to do that anymore.
Yeah. Andrew points out that he agrees maps are helpful for people not local. Yes, indeed. And George, you're not local to Hershey either. So
no, I'm not. I mean, I lived in Philly for a while. I grew up in Scranton. I went to Penn State, and then I'm out here. So no, my mother never took me to Hershey Park. Never went there. But we did go to Sansui in Wilkes-Barre, actually south of Wilkes-Barre in Hanover Township. And the thing I remember about that is we went through Pittston and all the trackless trolley wires over Pittston. My dad was telling me to shut up because I'm like, you got to stop. We got to see what's coming. I don't even know if this was after October or September of '58 when the trackless disappeared. Within 2 months, American Transit Enterprises had got rid of them all. I just remember going crazy. The hell with the park. Look at these wires.
George Chason points out that very little is recognizable. He was following along on Google Maps, and very little is recognizable except Lebanon, of course.
Yeah, Lebanon, I don't think has been torn down. No, but and I don't know if Chocolate Avenue has a lot of the original buildings. But if you drive in between there on some of these highways at 322, I mean, they've all been widened, and I'm sure they have lots of development. Yeah, how many cars can you eat?
Matt Non points out that Sanborn fire maps are a great reference, and railroad valuation maps. Penn State Archives have some Sanborn maps online. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I've looked at some of them, and some of the maps will show the trolley lines. Some of them don't, unfortunately. I don't know why. Then I have this set from the Lackawanna Historical Society. They were getting rid of some of their extra ones, and I made a contribution. It's not a sandboard, but whatever it is, they showed every trolley line. They showed every mine railroad. I mean, you got track all over it. It's marvelous.
I think everyone should be able to unmute themselves if they'd like to ask a question. I thought I hit the button earlier, but I only hit it a few minutes ago. So sorry about that, everyone. But you should be able to hit unmute. It says participants can, oh, wait. Now it says participants can unmute themselves. Okay, I undid it and then I redid it. Mr. Zalazo, I see you were successful there. Okay, good.
I've been able to unmute in New York.
Okay, good. Yeah, any other questions for George or questions about Hershey? I mean, I personally find the freight operation really interesting. And I was like begging George, actually back before Valentine's Day, I begged Lisa to do a presentation on Hershey because I think it lines up so well with like these chocolate holidays. So, and then I got George, George was doing all this research too. And so I got him for Halloween. So I think we've kind of taken a really good look at Hershey now.
It was my understanding from reading the books that are out there that basically it was the milk traffic that was and the express traffic that was really keeping the Hershey trolleys alive through the Depression and the 40s.
This is, I heard that. Lisa, you can chime in too. That's what I heard, that yeah, people bought cars in the 20s. I mean, that was common, and they started to drive. And I think the passenger loads at some points were primarily the kids going back and forth to school. And I think they paid a very, very discounted fare. So they probably weren't carrying that many people. You might have seen empty cars, but certainly the package express made money. The milk made money, although you can see them getting out of the milk business. And because they're getting out of Lebanon, they're getting, you know, they're buying trucks to get that stuff into their own dairy or dome plant. But the package service was pretty lucrative right up until the end, about 1942.
Philip Sauerlander from
hey, Phil.
Yeah,
how you doing?
He said he's met several people who rode the Hershey trolleys while operating at Rock Hill. So I'm guessing probably a lot of those were students.
That's possible. Yeah, Phil and I went to Penn State together, and that's where I met Phil.
And you can see Philip's presentation on trolley watches on our YouTube as well.
I saw that in person. I saw it in person. I thought that was a really fascinating presentation.
Yeah. All right. Any other Hershey comments or questions about upcoming trolleyologies? Edward, thank you so much for reaching out with all your presentations. We're going to line at least one of those up for 2022. There's several dozen to choose from, so I'm excited. And everybody else, George Chason, thank you for putting together the Zoom list that a lot of us get information from. And thank you everybody else for coming. Are there any final questions or comments?
Christian, I'd just like to say thank you for putting all the work together on these shows, because, you know, producing one of these on a weekly basis for another group, I fully know what that workload has to be. And now here's something for you. I have a presentation on the Isle of Man. I'm not trying to sell it to you, but recently I did a presentation to trolley buses in the United Kingdom.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So here I was, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, broadcasting at 8 o'clock in the UK on, you know, this American showing the Brits one of their trolley systems. sort of strange.
You know, it was funny. In 2019, I gave a talk at the London Underground Railway Society on the other tube, the Hudson tubes, and it was like a packed house. It was great. They really love it.
Yeah, that's great. And since we will be expanding our Trolleyology series, it'll be like a separate series called the Extra Board, but we're going to get some various programs from potentially around the world. So I know we've got a few people who have presentations on like railroads in the UK. Actually, I've heard about a lot of UK presentations. So yeah, maybe we'll have like a British month or something. But anywho, thank you guys again. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again in 2 weeks. I'm glad you all managed to register through our new ticketing system. If you had any problems with that, it's called e-tix. Just send me an email, assistant@patrolley.org, and I'll help you out. But it looks like everybody here made it. And sorry, Alan, did you have a question?
No, I saw Paul said Hudson Tubes would be awesome.
Oh,
So I said
yeah,
maybe. On this series, I don't know, it's a little out of the area.
It is, but you know, the folks who come to these presentations are, you know, you guys aren't just interested in Pennsylvania transit history. And if we want to keep maintaining all these Zooms, I think I'm going to have to expand beyond Pennsylvania at some point. So I would like to keep our original Trolleyology, you know, aligned with our collection and Pennsylvania stuff and trolley era topics, but I definitely don't mind expanding into other areas, as long as we, you know, we'll call it something different, but everybody's still interested in that stuff. So why not show it is my thinking. So yeah, as Catherine said, if it runs on rails, we're interested. So
It was what was interesting when I was given the series, there were 4 Brantford members that live in the UK that were like, hey, you know, I said I'm with Brantford, and I gave a little talk about, you know, what I do there, and they introduced themselves. Oh, we're Brantford members, and it was like, wow. So,
yeah, I know. Every month when we send our trolley fair newsletter out, there's like at least like a dozen or so that go overseas. So that's pretty neat. All right.
Rail enthusiasm is like a minor religion in the UK.
Indeed. Yeah. No shortage of heritage lines there.
nope.
All right, everybody. So we'll definitely think about a British month at some point. And for now,
Just tell me when you want the Quick Tramway National Tramway Museum show.
Okay.
It's available.
Okay. Thanks so much.
If you are thinking about UK, why don't you think of Canada? A lot of neat stuff was up in Canada.
Why not? Why not? So we'll work on that. I'll send out some emails and we'll get together again soon. But for now, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, George.